The silver mine made him rich. The curse made him deadly. When bounty hunters came for Thomas Silver King Kane, they expected a soft businessman. They found something else entirely. A man who traded his soul for fortune and wasn't done collecting debts. What's the saying? Oh, well, howdy, stranger. Old Jack at your service. Though the only service I've got is flapping my gums and telling, you're here to hear a story. So lean in. The silver mine carved into Copper Ridge, like a wound that wouldn't heal, bleeding ore and dreams in equal measure. The town that grew around it was a bastard child of greed and desperation, wooden shacks leaning against each other like drunken men, saloons that never closed their doors, and a main street paved with crushed hopes and silver dust. Thomas Kane stood on the balcony of his mansion, watching the ant-like figures of miners disappearing into the earth's belly below. His silk vest caught the morning light, a stark contrast to the rough canvas and leather of the man who made his fortune possible. At 42, Kane had everything the West could offer a man: wealth beyond counting, power that reached from Copper Ridge to Denver, and fear that followed his name like a shadow. But wealth in the West came with a price, and Kane had paid it in blood. The knock on his office door came precisely at 9, as it had every morning for 3 years. "Come," Kane called, not turning from a window. His reflection stared back, sharp cheekbones, gray-streaked beard, and eyes the color of winter sky. Those eyes had seen things that would break most men. They'd also done things that had broken most men. Marcus Webb, his foreman, entered with the day's reports clutched in his weathered hands. Webb had been with Kane since the beginning, when the Silver King mine was just a hole in the ground and a prayer. He'd watched Kane transform from a desperate prospector with calloused hands into something else entirely, something that made grown men cross themselves when they heard his name whispered in the dark. "Morning, Mr. Kane," Webb said, his voice careful. Even after all these years, he never forgot who held his life in those manicured hands. "Report," Kane said simply, finally turning from the window. South Tunnel hit another vein. Rich one, by the looks of it. But Webb hesitated, his fingers tightening on the papers. But Kane's voice carried the same chill as the mountain air. "We lost 3 men yesterday. Cave in on level 4. And there's talk among the miners. They're saying the mountain's angry, that we've dug too deep, taken too much." Kane moved to his desk, a massive oak piece shipped from San Francisco. On its surface lay maps of his empire, mines, railroads, towns where his money flowed like water through drought-cracked earth. But beside the maps lay something else, a leather-bound ledger, its pages filled not with numbers, but with names. Names of men who'd crossed Thomas Kane and learned too late what that mistake cost. "Superstitious fools," Kane said, though something flickered behind his eyes. "Pay the families. Double wages for the men working the dangerous tunnels. Fear costs money, but dead miners cost more." Webb nodded, but didn't leave. Kane looked up, noting the man's hesitation. "Something else, Marcus?" "There's been talk of bounty hunters in Copper Ridge, sir. Strangers asking questions about you. Men with the look of killers about them." Kane's hand stilled on the ledger. For 3 years, he'd been waiting for this moment. The past had a way of catching up to men like him, no matter how much silver they used to bury it. He'd built his fortune on a foundation of bodies, and foundations like that never stayed buried forever. "How many?" Kane asked. 3, maybe 4. They're being careful, but not careful enough. Word is they're professionals, the kind that don't quit until the job's done. Kane smiled, and Marcus Webb felt ice form in his stomach. He'd seen that smile before, usually right before someone disappeared into the desert and never came back. "Let them come," Kane said softly. "This mountain has swallowed harder men than them." As Webb left, Kane walked to a cabinet behind his desk. Inside, wrapped in black silk, lay a Colt .45 Peacemaker. Its grip was worn smooth from use, its barrel scratched and dented from years of violence. Most men in Kane's position would rely on hired guns, on the protection that money could buy. But Thomas Kane had learned long ago that some jobs required a personal touch. He lifted the weapon, feeling its familiar weight in his hand. The silver mine had made him rich, but the gun had made him king. And kings, he knew, didn't stay kings by showing weakness. Outside his window, the mountain wind howled through the trees, carrying with it the whispers of the men buried in its slopes. The Silver King mine had given Thomas Kane everything he'd ever wanted. Soon, he suspected, it would demand payment for the gift. But first, he had bounty hunters to kill. The saloon called the Broken Wheel sat at the heart of Copper Ridge like a rotting tooth in a skull's grin. Its batwing doors never stopped swinging, and the piano in the corner never stopped playing, though the tune changed depending on who was buying the drinks. Tonight, it was playing a funeral dirge. Jack Deadeye Morrison sat in the corner booth, his back to the wall and his gun hand free. Across from him, his partners in Blood Money nursed their whiskey and studied the room like wolves sizing up a flock. Morrison had been hunting men for 15 years, and in that time he'd learned that the most dangerous prey always looked the least dangerous. Rich men in silk vests were often the deadliest of all. "So, what do we know about this Silver King?" asked Sarah Black Widowchin, her voice barely above a whisper. She was the only woman bounty hunter Morrison had ever worked with, and the only one he trusted to watch his back. Her fingers, delicate as a pianist's, could slip a knife between a man's ribs faster than most men could draw their guns. "Thomas Kane," said the third member of their group, a mountain of a man known only as Bull Rodriguez. His voice rumbled like distant thunder. "Started as a prospector 8 years ago. Nothing special about him then. Just another fool digging holes in the ground, chasing dreams that wouldn't come true." Morrison leaned forward, his pale eyes scanning the saloon. The air was thick with tobacco smoke and the stench of unwashed bodies, but underneath it all was something else, fear. The kind of fear that clung to a place like Copper Ridge, where the Silver King's shadow fell across every building. Then something changed. 3 years ago, he struck silver. Not just a vein, the mother lode. Biggest strike in Colorado territory. But that's when things got interesting. Sarah's dark eyes glittered with curiosity. "Interesting how?" "Bodies started piling up," Morrison continued. "Claimed jumpers found dead. Rival miners disappearing in the night. Local sheriff died in what they called an accident, and Kane's man got elected to replace him. By the time the dust settled, Thomas Kane owned every inch of silver in a 50-mile radius." Bull grunted, downing his whiskey in one gulp. The liquor burned, but not as much as the stories they'd been hearing. "So he's a killer. So are we. What makes him special?" Morrison pulled a yellowed newspaper, clipping from his vest pocket, and spread it on the table. The headline read, "Silver King's Justice. 3 men found dead outside Copper Ridge." The paper was dated 6 months ago. The ink faded, but the story still chilling. 3 claimed jumpers tried to take over one of his smaller mines. They were professionals, armed, dangerous, experienced. The kind of men who'd killed dozens and never lost a night's sleep over it. Kane went after them alone. Sarah examined the newspaper cutting, her trained at picking up details others would miss. "Alone? That's either brave or stupid." "Neither," Morrison said grimly. "It was methodical. Found them the next morning, lined up neat as you please beside the trail. Each one shot once through the heart. No signs of a struggle, no witnesses. But here's the thing." Morrison's voice dropped even lower. "The coroner said they were shot from different directions, like Kane moved between them. Calm as you please, putting them down one by one." The saloon seemed to grow quieter around them, as if the very walls were listening to their conversation. In the corner, the piano player's funeral dirge grew more ominous, the notes hanging in the smoky air like ghosts. $10,000 bounty, Bull said, his eyes gleaming with greed. "Dead or alive?" "Preferably dead," Sarah added. "Men like Kane don't surrender. They fight until their last breath, and they take as many with them as they can." Morrison nodded, but something nagged at him. In 15 years of hunting men, he developed an instinct for danger, and every instinct he possessed was screaming at him that Thomas Kane was different. Not just dangerous, wrong, like something that should have stayed buried deep in the mountain. A shadow fell across their table. Dawn came to Copper Ridge like a blade across the throat, sharp, sudden, and stained with blood. The Silver King mine never slept, its hungry mouth breathing steam and swallowing men in endless shifts. But this morning was different. This morning, the mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. Thomas Kane stood at the entrance to the main shaft, his silver-headed cane tapping against the wooden planks. He traded his silk vest for leather and canvas, the clothes of a working man. But the transformation went deeper than fabric. The soft businessman who'd sat behind a mahogany desk was gone, replaced by something harder, something forged in the fire of violence and tempered in blood. "They came in during the night," Marcus Webb reported, his voice tight with nervous energy. "3 of them, just like you said, professional-like. They've been asking questions in town, showing that wanted poster with your face on it." Kane smiled, and several nearby miners quickly found reasons to be elsewhere. They'd learned to recognize that expression, the look of a predator who'd caught the scent of prey. Did they now? Kane's voice was soft, almost gentle. "And what did our good citizens tell them?" "Nothing useful. Fear has a way of sealing lips tighter than a bank vault." Webb paused, studying his employer's face. "But they're not giving up. Professional bounty hunters don't quit until the job's done or they're dead." Kane nodded approvingly. "Good. I respect professionalism in any trade, even one as distasteful as theirs." He turned toward the mine entrance, where the great wooden wheel that controlled the elevator creaked and groaned under its burden. "Have you prepared the special tour?" Webb's face paled. In the 3 years he'd worked for the Silver King, he'd seen preparations for such tours before. None of the guests had ever emerged to complain about the accommodations. "The deep tunnels are ready, sir. Level 7, just like you specified." "Excellent." Kane's cane tapped a rhythmic beat against the ground. "And our welcoming committee?" "Positioned and ready. 12 of your best men, all armed, all loyal." Webb hesitated. "Sir, are you certain you want to face them directly? These aren't local troublemakers or claim jumpers. These are killers with bounties of their own on their heads." Kane's laugh was like the sound of silver coins dropping into a grave. "Marcus, my dear fellow, what do you think I am?" Before Webb could answer, a shout echoed from the valley below. 3 riders were approaching the mine, their horses kicking up clouds of dust in the morning light. They rode with the easy confidence of people who'd never met a problem they couldn't solve with bullets and blood. Kane pulled a pocket watch from his vest, solid silver naturally, with his initials engraved in flowing script. Right on time. Punctuality is such a rare virtue these days. The bounty hunters reined in their horses at the mine's entrance. Morrison's pale eyes swept the area, taking in positions of Kane's men, the layout of the buildings, potential escape routes. Professional habits died hard, even when walking into what was obviously a trap. "Thomas Kane," Morrison called out, his voice carrying clearly in the thin mountain air. "We've got business with you." Kane stepped forward, his hands empty, his cane hanging loosely at his side. To the untrained eye, he looked like exactly what he claimed to be, a wealthy mine owner, soft from good living and easy money. But the bounty hunters weren't untrained, and they could see the coiled tension in his movements, the way his eyes never stopped moving, cataloging threats and opportunities. "Gentlemen, lady," Kane touched the brim of his hat politely to Sarah. "Welcome to the Silver King mine. I understand you've been asking about me in town." Sarah's hand rested on her gun, but she didn't draw. "Not yet. We're here for the bounty on your head, Kane. $10,000, dead or alive." "Dead or alive," Kane repeated thoughtfully. "Such a delightfully flexible arrangement. I do so appreciate adaptability in business dealings." He gestured toward the mine entrance. "Perhaps we should discuss this privately? I have so much to show you." Bull's massive hand tightened on his rifle. "We'll discuss it right here." Kane's smile never wavered. "I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, I've invested considerable time and effort in preparing for your visit. It would be terribly rude of you to refuse my hospitality after I've gone to such trouble." The morning wind picked up, carrying with it the sound of metal on stone from deep within the mountain. Somewhere far below, in tunnels that hadn't seen sunlight in years, things were stirring. The elevator cage descended into the belly of the mountain like a coffin dropping into hell. The wooden platform creaked and swayed with each foot of their descent, while the walls of the shaft pressed closer with every passing second. Kane stood perfectly at ease in the center of the cage, his silver-headed cane balanced in both hands, while his three guests tried to hide their growing unease. The descent seemed to last forever. Morrison counted the levels as they passed. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each level housed hundreds of miners, their pickaxes ringing against stone in an endless percussion of greed. But as they went deeper, the sounds changed. The rhythmic striking became irregular, desperate. "Level 7. Kane announced as the elevator shuddered to a stop. "My pride and joy. This is where we do our most specialized mining." The doors opened onto a tunnel that stretched into darkness, so complete it seemed to swallow the light from their lanterns. The air was thick and oppressive, heavy with the weight of earth above and something else, something that made Sarah's skin crawl and Bull's trigger finger itch. "After you," Kane said pleasantly, gesturing into the tunnel. Morrison's instinct screamed at him to refuse, to fight their way back to the surface. But three facts held him in place. The cage controls were on Kane's side of the platform. 12 armed men waited above, and somewhere in this mountain was $10,000 in bounty money. "Lead the way," Morrison said, his hand never leaving his gun. They walked single file through the tunnel, their footsteps echoing strangely in the confined space. The walls were rough-hewn stone, but carved into them at regular intervals were symbols that none of the bounty hunters recognized. They looked ancient, predating any known script, and they seemed to writhe in the dancing light of the lanterns. "Fascinating artwork, isn't it?" Kane's voice drifted back to them. "We found these when we first broke through to this level. The local Ute tribe claims this mountain was sacred to them, forbidden territory. They have such colorful stories about what lies buried here." Sarah felt cold despite the oppressive heat. "What kind of stories?" "Oh, the usual primitive nonsense. Demons sleeping in the earth. Spirits hungry for blood and silver. The kind of tales that would make for entertaining reading if one believed in such things." Kane's laugh echoed off the stone walls. They reached a widening in the tunnel, a natural cavern that had been expanded by human hands. Lanterns hung from iron spikes driven into the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to move independently of their flames. In the center of the cavern stood a table made of raw silver ore, its surface polished to mirror brightness. "Welcome to my private office," Kane said, setting his lantern on the table. The light reflected off the silver surface, creating patterns that hurt to look at directly. Bull grunted. "Office, in a hole in the ground. This hole contains more wealth than most men see in 10 lifetimes. But wealth is just another form of power. And power." Kane's eyes glittered in the lantern light. "Power is what separates the living from the dead." Morrison felt the trap closing around them like jaws. The tunnel behind them had seemed straight when they entered, but now it branched in 3 different directions. "Enough games, Kane," Morrison said, drawing his weapon. "Indeed," Kane agreed. "But I wonder, did you come here to collect a bounty, or to deliver one?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre. Sarah's knife appeared in her hand as if by magic, while Bull raised his rifle to his shoulder. But Kane made no move to draw his own weapon. Instead, he reached into his vest and pulled out folded papers. "I took the liberty of investigating my visitors," Kane said. "Jack Morrison, wanted in 3 territories for murder. Sarah Chun, price on her head in Denver. Miguel Rodriguez, bounties that would buy a small ranch." He smiled at their shocked expressions. "Did you really think you were the only ones who knew how to use a telegraph?" Morrison's gun wavered. "You're lying." "Am I?" Kane's smile widened. "Your bounties combined total $15,000, considerably more than the pittance on my head." The silver table reflected their faces like a mirror made of frozen moonlight, showing them distorted versions of themselves. Hunter and hunted blurred beyond recognition. Kane's revelation had shifted the balance of power in the cavern, like an avalanche reshaping a mountain. $15,000, Kane repeated, savoring the words like fine wine. Of course, collecting on your bounties presents certain logistical challenges. Dead outlaws don't walk themselves to the sheriff's office. Morrison's finger tightened on his trigger, but something held him back. In all his years of hunting men, he'd never been outmaneuvered so completely. Kane had turned their own profession against them, made them the prey they'd spent their lives pursuing. "What do you want?" Sarah asked, her voice steady despite the knife trembling in her hand. "Want?" Kane laughed, and the sound echoed off the cavern walls like the tolling of church bells. "My dear woman, I already have everything I want. This mountain has given me wealth beyond counting, power beyond measure, and pleasures beyond imagination. What I need from you is much simpler." He moved around the table with fluid grace, his cane clicking against the stone floor. Each step seemed to echo longer than it should, as if the mountain itself was amplifying the sound. "I need you to understand something about the Silver King mine, about what we really extract from these tunnels." Kane stopped beside one of the carved symbols on the wall. In the dancing light of the lanterns, it almost seemed to pulse with its own internal rhythm. Bull's rifle tracked Kane's movement, but the man seemed unconcerned. 3 years ago, when I first broke through to this level, I found more than silver. I found something the Ute tribe had sealed away centuries ago. Something hungry. Something that had been waiting in the darkness for someone brave enough, or foolish enough, to set it free. Sarah felt the temperature in the cavern drop by 10 degrees. "You're talking nonsense." "Am I?" Kane pressed his hand against the carved symbol, and for just a moment, it seemed to glow with an inner fire. The Ute called it the silver hunger, a spirit that fed on greed and violence, that grew stronger with every drop of blood spilled in its name. They trapped it here, sealed it with their most powerful magic, and declared this mountain forbidden forever. Morrison's gun never wavered, but sweat beaded on his forehead. "And you let it out." "I made a bargain with it," Kane corrected. "I feed it what it craves, the blood of violent men, the souls of those who live by taking life, and it rewards me with wealth and power. Every claim jumper I've killed, every rival I've eliminated, every drop of blood spilled in these tunnels has made me richer and stronger." The carved symbols on the walls seemed to pulse faster now, as if responding to Kane's words. The silver table reflected their faces more clearly, showing them not as they were, but as they would be. Corpses with empty eye sockets and mouths stretched wide in silent screams. "You're insane," Bull growled, but his voice cracked slightly. "Insane?" Kane's smile widened, showing teeth that gleamed like polished silver. "I'm the richest man in 3 territories. I control more wealth than some nations. I have the power of life and death over thousands of people. If that's insanity, then sanity is vastly overrated." He moved closer to the table, and the bounty hunters instinctively backed away. But there was nowhere to retreat. The tunnel behind them had somehow become a solid wall of stone. "The silver hunger grows tired of ordinary fare," Kane continued. "Claimed jumpers and petty thieves barely whet its appetite anymore. But 3 professional killers, 3 souls steeped in violence and blood, that's a feast worthy of a king." Morrison finally understood. They hadn't walked into a trap. They'd walked into a sacrifice. The other bounty hunters, the ones who came before us. "Ah, you're quicker than I thought," Kane said approvingly. "Yes, there have been others. 7 groups in the past 2 years, all drawn by that delicious $10,000 bounty. All so eager to collect their blood money that they never stopped to wonder why the reward was so generous, or why no one had ever claimed it." The silver table began to hum with an otherworldly resonance, and the carved symbols on the walls pulsed brighter. Sarah felt something brush against her mind, something cold and alien and infinitely hungry. The silver table erupted in blinding light, and the mountain screamed. It was a sound no human throat could make. a shriek of ancient rage and bottomless hunger that had been building for centuries behind walls of stone and native magic. The carved symbols blazed like brands in a forge, casting writhing shadows that moved independent of any earthly light source. Morrison fired first, his bullet striking Kane's center mass. The impact spun the Silver King around, blood blooming across his silk vest, but he didn't fall. Instead, he laughed, a sound more terrible than the mountain scream. Too late. Kane shouted over the supernatural chorus, echoing through the cavern. The ritual has begun. The silver hunger wakes. Sarah's knife flew through the air, its blade finding the hollow of Kane's throat. He staggered, clutching at the wound, silver light spilling from his fingers like liquid moonbeams. But still he stood, still he smiled, still he beckoned to something vast and terrible stirring in the depths of the mountain. Bull's rifle spoke 3 times in rapid succession, each shot finding its mark. Kane's body jerked with the impacts, his expensive clothes shredded and soaked with blood. But with each wound, the silver light around him grew brighter, and the hunger in the walls grew stronger. "Don't you understand?" Kane gasped, his voice growing stronger even as his body grew weaker. "I was never the threat. I was just the key. The silver hunger has been sleeping for 300 years, dreaming of the day when enough blood would be spilled to wake it. Every man I killed, every soul I fed to the darkness, it was all building to this moment." The cavern floor began to crack, silver light bleeding through the fissures like molten metal. The temperature plummeted, and frost formed on the barrel of Morrison's gun as he emptied it into Kane's chest. But it was Sarah who understood first. "The symbols," she shouted over the mountain's roar. "They're not decorations, they're a binding spell. Kane's blood is breaking it." She was right. With each drop of the Silver King's blood that touched the floor, another symbol flared and died. The ancient Ute magic that had contained the silver hunger for centuries was unraveling like a rope cut, strand by strand. Kane fell to his knees beside the silver table, his life flowing out in crimson streams. But his eyes burned with triumph. "I made a bargain," he whispered. "Wealth and power and life. And in death," he coughed, blood speckling his lips, "in death, I become part of something eternal." The mountain shuddered, and chunks of stone began falling from the ceiling. But it wasn't an earthquake that shook the earth. It was something much larger, much older, much hungrier, stretching after centuries of sleep. Morrison grabbed Sarah's arm. "We need to get out of here. Now." But when they turned toward the tunnel, they found their path blocked. Marcus Webb stood in the entrance, along with a dozen miners, their eyes reflecting the same silver light that poured from Kane's wounds. "No one leaves," Webb said, his voice distorted as if spoken through water. "The Silver King's final gift requires witnesses, requires sacrifice, requires blood." Bull raised his rifle, but before he could fire, the miners rushed forward. They moved with inhuman speed and strength, their pickaxes singing through the air like deadly music. The bounty hunters found themselves fighting for their lives against men who should have been dead from their wounds, but kept coming, kept attacking, kept bleeding silver light. In the chaos, Kane's body finally fell forward onto the silver table. The moment his blood touched its polished surface, every symbol in the cavern exploded in brilliance. The mountain scream rose to a crescendo that shattered stone and sanity alike. And from the depths of the earth, something vast and terrible and eternally hungry began to rise. Morrison's last coherent thought, as the silver hunger claimed him, was that they'd come seeking a $10,000 bounty. Instead, they found something worth far more, and far more dangerous, than all the silver in the mountain. The Silver King was dead, but his kingdom would live forever, fed by the greed and violence of men who came seeking easy money and found only darkness waiting in the depths. Above ground, the town of Copper Ridge felt the mountain shake. They saw silver light bleeding from the mine entrance like liquid starfire, and they knew, with the certainty of prey animals sensing a predator, that Thomas Kane's final bargain had been paid in full. The Silver King mine would never close. It would always be hungry, and there would always be someone foolish enough to descend into its depths seeking wealth and finding only death in the darkness below. See you around, my friend. I've got another story for you.